Okay, so please welcome to the stage Sylvia Halpert. So Sylvia, take it away.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Halpert, and I'm really excited to be able to talk with you about the mysterious people group that vanished, the lost 10 tribes of Israel. And I don't know if I should wait for people to sit down and just start in. Okay, the mystery of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. As I'm going through this, I want you to really open your minds to the possibility that these events that I'm talking about might relate to your ancestors. Okay, the lost 10 tribes were a whole people group, a powerful kingdom that was under King Saul, then King David, and then his son Solomon. And they were a strong kingdom until they split apart. And they have been apart for 2,700 years, and very close to God's heart is to get them back together again. That's before we start into the history of that. Let's back up and take a run through some very important points in that creation of the world, and then the flood, and then the Tower of Babel. And we'll try to go fast so we can get up to the history, but it's good to know these things in the background. The book of Genesis covers about 2,300 years of history and a lot of concepts, key players in this whole story that's unfolding. And if you haven't read the Bible, you might want to just read Genesis and try and get that down so you'll have a leg up on most people. God created the world according to the Bible in 7 days, and one of the things that I find really interesting is the firmament. And Joe was talking about what's up in the sky there in the firmament, and that the firmament was separated the waters above from the waters below. This is very important. It's beautiful, pure, clean, crystal clear drinking water all around God's heaven and in the earth and below the earth. On the seventh day, or the sixth day, God created man. And one of the things that is very interesting about the creation of man was in his throat he put something that the animals don't have. Animals chirp or growl or do all kinds of noises, but they can't speak. God really wanted his people to communicate. So he put something called a hyoid bone, which is a speaking bone in the throat. It's a floating bone, and it enables us to have language. And then he, along with that, provided this beautiful, universal, if that's a word we can use, language for mankind, hardwired it into us, and we can call it Edenic because it started in the Garden of Eden. The miraculous thing about Edenic is that it can diversify into all languages on Earth. And this is an exciting thing that we find more about in the story of the Tower of Babel. Next one on our timeline is the flood of Noah. We have some interesting things having to do with the waters above and the waters beneath. It says, the windows of heaven were opened and the fountains of the great deep burst forth. These fountains of the great deep spewed up water and minerals, and they were laid down, which we can mine today. But the waters rose and rose, and the water came down until the mountains were covered. And that's the whole story of that. But a man named Rafael Garcia, he calls himself Fake Flip on YouTube, and you must check him out because I came across him one day and I said, oh, he's got the explanation for the tides. Well, Joe had some about the tides, but he says that these fountains of the great deep are still in existence and that they spew out, many of them spew out fresh water. And that the water comes out in such volume that it rises as the tides, and then it goes back down again through big whirlpools and holes in the earth into the abyss to be recycled So all the salinization that's increasing because of the salt that was laid down in the big salt flats under the ocean, as well as like in Utah, this water is making it too salty for life to continue. And so God washes it down and sends more fresh water. Isn't that cool? I thought it was cool. So watch for his book. And he's using the name Fake Flip. The title in English is Leonardo da Vinci, and Leonardo da Vinci apparently knew about this, and the truth about the tides. And he has written it in Portuguese, and he sent me a PDF, and I was having so much fun reading it before I came here. I wrote a little book based on what he has discovered called The Secrets of the Tide, and I have it back here on the table. Next stop is the Tower of Babel, and I have a book here by the man who discovered Edenic, this universal hardwired into our brain language for everybody. His name is Isaac Moseson, and he has written an amazing book called The Origin of the Speeches, in which he describes how the language of Edenic was evolved at the Tower of Babel. You know how God scattered the people. They each took their language with them and formed a new nation. But he didn't just do it randomly. It wasn't gibberish. It was done by three of them, several ways. You can maybe imagine how this happened. He used vowel shifts. And when my kids were younger, they used to say, I like to eat apples and bananas. And I said, and then they'd say, well, let's change it, we'll practice our vowels. So you say it with a like to eat fresh apples and bananas. And then they said, well, let's do it with an E. Like to eat fresh apples and bananas. And So you can see what happens when you shift the vowels. You can't tell what they're saying. But then added to that was something called, in linguistics, called metathesis. And it's basically dyslexia. Can somebody tell me what dyslexia is? Just real basically. Yeah, flipping letters. For example, you ask a question, but then when we moved down south, we heard people say ask question, so yes, they would flip. And at the Tower of Babel, words like earth, or in Edenic or Proto-Pure Hebrew, eretz, were flipped completely. So you have terra. Can you see it there, how earth could be said backwards, terra? That would be the French. I just put down Halpert to Halpert. My name is Halpert, but my husband's grandfather came across from Poland. He spoke his words with a guttural H. Halpert. So half the family thought they were Halperts, and half the family thought they were Halperts, and they called each other a little later and said, how do you spell the name? And they said, well, we registered the kids as Galpert in school. And they said, no, we're going to be Halperts. But you can see how down in your throat is the H sound, and the k and the g. These are guttural sounds. They could all exchange, and this is what happened to a lot of the words. Okay, the last 10 tribes of Israel are awakening. In my opinion, the awakening to flat earth and awakening to a lot of things that are going on simultaneously are all under the umbrella of the awakening of the lost 10 tribes. This is really, really an important and overlooked prophecy, probably the most important prophecy in the Bible. It's important to God. He says he wants to do this with all his heart and soul. I don't know anything else that God does with all his heart and soul, but this he really wants to happen. And that's these two parts of the kingdom he wants to happen back. It says in Isaiah 11, he shall assemble the outcasts of Israel from the four corners of the earth. And it was important to Jesus. He told parables all focused on lost objects. Did you notice that? The lost coin, the lost sheep, and then the big one was the lost prodigal son, the seed flower. And the prodigal son story is very much related to the lost tribes. Jesus said, I am sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And he told his disciples, go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. It seemed like he was launching a return for these lost people. These are not Jews. These are different tribes. We'll come to that. So who are they? Where are they? Well, the nation of Israel is in two parts, as I told you. The north was the north, called the house of Israel, because most of the population was there. There are 10 tribes. And the south was the house of Judah, and these became the modern-day Jews. You see where we put David on the map there? David Weiss. Judah and Israel. Judah is the Jews. These are some synagogues. And the west is where the 10 tribes of Israel went. Many of them went to Christianity, the Christian nations at least. Why does this matter? Well, according to the Bible, the restoration of the lost 10 tribes, these are called the Joseph tribes because Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, were ruling there. The Joseph tribes, the return of the Joseph tribes will come before the healing of the whole world. The Jews have returned to the land, many of them, and reinstated the kingdom there, but that's just their tribe. The Jews and the 10 tribes or Joes will awaken first and be together before the rest of the world gets healed. This is why it's important that we know this and do what we're supposed to be doing if we're a part of this. So the Jews and Joes come first, and then the world will be saved. So who were the founding fathers of the nation of Israel? 3 founding fathers, 3 great men were given 3 great promises. The 3 men, can anybody tell me? Well, they're here, they're in alphabetical order, right? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We had in Sunday school, how many went to Sunday school? Did you ever hear the song, Father Abraham had many sons had Father Abraham, and I'm one of them, so are you, so let's just praise the Lord. Father, thank you. He said, Abraham, follow me, and in Hebrew it's lek lekah, if you know a little bit of Hebrew, it means walk, like walk for yourself, Abraham. So he had to leave his family and walk for his dad. I think we know about that as flat earthers. You know what it's like to go by yourself. And I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. He's going to get blessings and money and prosperity and power poured on him. And I will make you a blessing so you can be a blessing to everybody else in here. And at one point he says, every family in the earth. This is an amazing thing to me when I saw every family. So every family on earth is going to be touched by this man. Okay? Isaac, his son, came along and he said the same thing to Isaac in different ways. This is going to be your land where you are. They actually told Abraham the dimensions of the land, but we'll come to that in a second. Isaac had the same promises, and then his son Jacob had the same promises. Jacob would become very famous. Does anybody know what this is? What's the name of it? Jacob's Ladder. Jacob's Ladder, right, okay. Jacob's so famous that he's even on toys. His name is Jack in English, and we have lots of nursery rhymes about Jack. This is all infiltrated into our culture. Jack and Jill, Jack the Sprat, Jack and the Beanstalk, Jack the Nimble, Jack the Quick, Jack Horner sat on a corner, and the house that Jack built. Can you think of another one? What's that?
Beanstalk?
Yeah, Jack right there. The house that Jack built. And then we have the Hebrew version of Jack, Jacob, this young Jacob, and we put an N in there because the Western English has some trouble with the two days together, so we put an N, nasalize it, say gang. And if you do go, don't forget a flag named after Jack, Jacob. The three great promises. One, a people, innumerable descendants like stars of the heavens and sands of the seashore. They would be prosperous world powers, including non-monarchies. They would get a land, and this was an eternal homeland, Genesis 15, 18 to 21. And I asked AI how big it would be, and it came back at 300,000 square miles. Currently, Israel is about 8,000 square miles. Thirdly, they would have a destiny, and this would be their task to teach the ways of God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so that they could bless every family on the earth, help them to be happy, prosperous, and good by God's standards, which would be the Ten Commandments, right? Okay, did the 10 tribes fulfill this worldwide task? They certainly tried to during the age of colonization. They went around with explorers like one of our favorites as flat earthers is Captain James Cook, who discovered and claimed and conquered and then led to populating and colonizing and civilizing new lands. They went all over the place. You can see them going down to Antarctica, going on that. Many other explorers. Concurrent with the exploration time and following it was the missionary era. And I think I was part of the tail end of that because my mother used to make flannel graphs to send out to missionaries in Africa and China and Ecuador and different places around the world. And that's what we lived by. We'd have our little girls' club to go to church, and we'd make little dresses for African babies, and we'd roll bandages. They sent these off, and so missionaries, and there's a picture of one. If you've never heard of David Livingstone, you owe it to yourself to find out about him and maybe get a kid's book on how he was attacked by a lion. He was an explorer and a missionary, and his big thing was to open trade routes. He thought that would civilize people, to have people from all over the world coming and helping to civilize. So the missionaries made a big impact by opening up trade routes. They taught good morals, the Bible. They were instrumental in abolishing slavery, bringing class to the existing cultures, and taming traditions like widow burning. They fought for women's and children's rights. They reformed labor laws, curtailed drunkenness, educated and set up schools and charitable organizations, provided food, taught agriculture, gave medical aid, clinics, hospitals, sanitation, cleanliness, and latrines. They dominated cultures using righteous means and taught citizens to govern themselves with justice, according to the biblical standard of justice, and established local governments, courts, set up frameworks for civil society, in other words, and taught them to be independent. My aunt and uncle were missionaries in the Congo for 20 years, and they had dental clinics, they had medical clinics. Missionaries did a lot of good. We have criticisms about them too. We have criticisms about the explorers. But basically, when you look at the big picture, this looks like they were doing good things for the world. There's another prophecy, and then I call it the Gates prophecy, that was given to these Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Isaac's wife. It was called the Gates prophecy because they were told that they would also, their descendants would be very numerous and that they would possess the gates of their enemies. Abraham is told, your seed shall possess the gates of your enemies, and Rebecca was also told that, blessed by her brothers when she went to marry Isaac. And God spoke through Jeremiah to Israel and said, you are my battle axe and weapon of war. This is pretty aggressive. For those who with evil I break in pieces the nations, and with evil I destroy kingdoms. So these people who were to really police the world using God's kindness and goodness. And how would they do that? Well, here's one way you could imagine. The U.S. military has how many bases around the world? in harm's way, possessing the gates of their enemy. 850, and other nations like Britain and Canada, another comes up to about 1,000. The Bible says these descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would be the strongest group of nations on earth, and they would destroy their enemies. So I put down 1,000 different military bases worldwide, situated near volatile situations. They set up personnel, equipment, training to police the area, respond to emergencies, subdue evil, terrorism, attacks on innocent people. They would need soldiers, helicopters, planes, ships. Who on earth is going to handle such a monumental task? This man, Jacob, and his 12 sons. He couldn't do it alone. God gave him 12 boys. One night he was running away from his brother Esau, and Esau said, when Dad dies, I'm going to kill you. He had stolen the birthright from him. God would have given it to Jacob, but he preempted God. He had this dream with his head on a rock, and he saw a ladder going up to heaven, and angels coming up and down, and I sometimes wonder whether he's thinking of monarchies, like kings and queens ascending and descending the throne. Anyway, in the morning, he was so impressed, he turned the rock that he was sleeping on its end and put oil on it. It was kind of like an altar. He said, this is like the entrance of heaven here. Bethel, the house of God. That rock became famous in mythology and legend, and it is now was moved from Scotland. You see it down at the bottom there. They wrapped it up so it doesn't break apart, and they moved it and put it under the seat of the throne where King Charles was crowned, and all the kings, all the monarchs have been sitting being crowned on that. Apparently they were in ancient Israel too. My girlfriend wrote a story, her name is Lori Dahl. She wrote a book, and it's on Amazon called Princess and the Amazing Stone. It's about this stone and Zedekiah, the last prince, last king of Israel, and his little daughter. And I wrote another one too for kids. So Jacob's 12 sons were from 4 wives. First wife was Leah, and the other primary wife was Rachel. Rachel was his favorite. But each of these girls had a handmaiden. And in ancient times when women were barren, they would give their handmaiden to their husband as kind of a concubine or secondary wife, so she could bear children to add to the family. And so these are 6 sons from Leah, and her name Zilpah had 2, and then Rachel had 2 boys, one of whom was Joseph, the very famous one, and Bilhah had 2. These can be identified where they are currently on earth by looking in Genesis 49, Deuteronomy 33, and Numbers 24. As you read these qualities about these men, you realize the last 10 tribes are not hiding out in some jungle in New Guinea. They are very powerful, and they can be identified. Actual nations. Here's Jacob with his hand on the head of one of the boys, and these are his boys. Reuben was the eldest. He should have received the role of the eldest big brother, the prince of the family, but he disqualified himself by his behavior. His dad said, you can't be. And he was also known for his desire to be the big brother, the best at everything. And he was, emphasized classiness, but he was unstable. And his father said, you can't be the family prince. And his sons can be identified as the clans who founded France, the Roubaré Franks. A lot of this material I got from a man named Yer Davidi. You'll really want to see what he has. I think I have a copy of his book, The Tribes, where each of these tribes ended up. Simeon was passionate and tough, and his guys' descendants went to Wales and Ireland, and they were also scattered. All of these are scattered around the world, but they do have places where they fulfilled their destiny too. I think sometimes when I look at the information about the soccer players in Wales, I think they might be descendants of Simeon. Then the third one was Levi. He was dedicated to God, and he is a leader, teacher, very musical. And if you've ever heard bands, choirs of Welshmen singing, my dad was from Wales, my grandpa, and my dad used to just report around the house singing. But they, possibly, he was descended from Levi. A lot of pastors were, I think, but a lot of rabbis can also trace their lineage back to the Cohens, which is the priestly part of Levi. Then there was Judah. Judah was finally the one that earned the right to be the national leader, and he became the Jewish people, along with his little brother Benjamin. We'll get to him in the end. Then Issachar. Issachar was the leader of times. I think he was looking at the sky a lot, and some of his descendants went to Switzerland and get clocks, right, watches, and Finland. Then Zebulun is seafaring, and he is located in Holland, and you should go through these faster. Dan traveled everywhere, and he liked to name places after him. The Don River, the Danube, the Dnieper, the Don, the Dniester, and he carried the desire for justice and the law with him, and he established Dane law in Denmark, where Mark was, and all through Norway. You see in this chart, this map where Dane law was spread throughout, and the Vikings, I guess, would carry it with them, but they established Dane law in England, and it became British common law, which came from there over to the U.S. constitutional law, which is in great part biblical. Naphtali was said to have beautiful children and wide open spaces, living and running free, and went to Norway. Gad was said to fight bravely, and his sons, one of whom was Sweden, there's a name close to that, founded Sweden. Asher was a happy guy, and he was supposed to go to Ireland as one of the places, and the Irish eyes are smiling, maybe that's why, because they're Asher people. I know Dan also went to Ireland. Then Joseph, almost the last, the best of the tribes, but he went through so much in his lifetime that he maintained his integrity, and God told Jacob, you're going to bless both of these boys, his sons, and give them the leadership. So Joseph kind of duplicated himself. So he ended up, instead of 12 tribes altogether, he had 13 really. And then there's young Benjamin, who is, somebody was talking about Benjamin. He had a lot of left-handed guys. They had a whole regiment who could sling with their left hand. They were known for that. Total of 13 tribes, and you have 13 original colonies and 13 stripes in their flag, so that's kind of a clue. And there's your Davidi. He's written a series of books, a lot of books, and he puts out a video almost every week. He's just passionate about this. He tells you where your tribe is. There's Joseph in Egypt during the famine. The family of 70 Jacob's family came to Egypt, and they later became slaves under somebody who didn't know Joseph. I think it was probably an invading king who should have known, because they would keep records, but he didn't know Joseph, and he enslaved the people. Joseph was long gone by there, and hundreds of years later they're being slaves. Moses came along, led them through the Red Sea, and under a full moon, and to free them not to be just willy-nilly anywhere in the desert. He took them to the mountain where, I just put that picture in because it's so dramatic. It looks like maybe Pharaoh's army is being drowned. It's nice food. And then Moses went up the mountain and got the 10 Commandments. This was the code of ethics that they were to live by and to help bless the whole world. Every family on earth needed to know this way of living the correct way of living. after Moses died, Joshua took control, and he was the army guy who led them into the promised land. And the people who lived there were very wicked, and God had said, wait until they finally fill up their wickedness to a certain point at which they are going to be kicked out of the land. And so here's the land divided up according to the different tribes. Manasseh, you see, has a really big orange section here, and the Jews of Judah are down in the south. Okay, they had the Judges era with Samuel and then some other really good judges, some other wild times in that book of Judges. But they asked Samuel, could we have a king like everybody else? And he said, no, you don't want a king. He'll tax you and he'll take your guys for the army. He'll have your girls working in the palace. And you want to keep those kids down on the farm. No, you don't want a king. And they said, we really want a king. So God, he cried all night, God, they want a king. And God said, don't feel bad, it's not you they're resisting, it's the rebellion against me. Give them a king. So he gave them a man named Saul, who was a head and shoulders above everybody else, and his army guy, who was pretty humble at the beginning. And then he had to be replaced by David, and then David's son Solomon. And at the end of Solomon's reign, he got into some bad stuff, because he married a lot of foreign women who brought their gods to the land. And God spoke to a prophet and said, tell him he's losing the kingdom. So 10 of the tribes were defected, came to the next king, Solomon's boy, Rehoboam. And I've heard Jewish fathers say to their son, don't be Rehoboam, don't be rebellious, listen to your elders. And they had a big split. North against the south. The south was the Jewish people of Judah and the dynasty of David, and they were faithful to God and to the calendar. And the north became Israel. It was 10 tribes who rebelled against the dynasty of David. And we end up with 2 separate kingdoms, and this is where we get the 2 sticks. This was really a sad time. I mean, it must have been sad for God, because these are his chosen people. They're supposed to do all this wonderful stuff and be powerful. Now they're fractured into. But he always is the Redeemer. God is very famous for redeeming situations. And he took this and turned it into something powerful. The northern kingdom was under the Ephraimite guy, the son of Joseph. And his Ephraimite king was a man named Jeroboam. Jeroboam canceled the Torah culture. He created a whole new calendar. And this is where Troy Miller is going to come and tell us about the new calendar, how Jeroboam messed with the biblical calendar and how he can get back to it. I think this is I know this is really important. A lot of people are at least doing the Sabbath and trying to do Passover and get back to this original calendar that pleases God. It's based on the history of the nation. He also set out roadblocks in Jerusalem so that people wouldn't be tempted to defect back. And he erected 2 golden bull calves. This was a no-no. Idolatry was the worst of the worst. And these worship centers were set up so that nobody would feel they had to get down to the temple in Jerusalem. I didn't mention, before they had the temple in Jerusalem, they had a house of worship for God and a center for the government in the wilderness. And that was called the Mishkan, or the tabernacle. And Andrew Hoy is going to be speaking in a few minutes. I've got a few more minutes to finish up. And he's going to tell us some specifics about the great discovery he made about the shape of the tabernacle. It's dome-shaped, like our world, like our firmament. And Troy will be talking about these specifics about the calendar. So these are natural flows from this overview of 6,000 years. Thank you, God, for setting that up. It was so nice. So in the north, there are no righteous kings. Queen Jezebel and Ahab are famous for their witchcraft and idolatry party and ball worship, and the prophet Elijah staged a challenge to the prophets of Baal, calf worship, and fire came down from heaven, if you remember that story. And they said, oh, Yahweh is God, Yahweh is God. And then they went back to idolatry again. So I have here, somebody told me that they were burning marijuana and people were getting high in the high places. Now those who like cannabis might object, say that's fine, but I think they were abusing it along with some other things that were going on. And they got into human sacrifice. So eventually God said, out you go. If you defile the land, it will vomit you out as it vomited out the nations that were before you. God sent a succession of Assyrian kings who deported the people in stages. Tiglath-Pileser, then Shalmaneser, then Sargon, and Sennacherib. And over the years, they've all taken all the biggest deportation in human history. 2 Kings 17 says the Lord rejected the house of Israel in the north and afflicted them and delivered them into the hand of spoilers until he had cast them out of his sight. For he tore Israel from the house of David, and he made Jeroboam the son of Nebat king, and Jeroboam drove Israel from following the Lord. They departed not from Jeroboam's sins until God removed them out of his sight. Okay, so everybody was carried off to the land of Assyria. There it is. They were taken the biggest deportation. Some went by east across by land to Assyria, and some were taken by ships. And they went up, I think maybe my ancestors went up and worked in walnut and tin mines. It was awful. Assyrians were not nice people. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried it as their capital, carried them away. The Assyrians, or the Israelites, were good archers, and they put them as a buffer around the Assyrian Empire so that they would, if they were attacked by their enemies, they'd have to get through the Israelites first. And so they did a good job. And they became known as the Scythians. So watch for that SK sound, Scythians, because these were the sons of Isaac. The sons of Isaac were known as Issachar, the Scutai, the Scythians, and the Iskuzak, and other names. They were wonderful artisans, and I think that Andy would appreciate this as he tells us about the things they made for the tabernacle. These Scythians were the sons of Isaac, skillful artisans. This all took place in the area called the Caucasus Mountains. After a little while of being there, the Assyrian Empire became weak, and they took off through the Caucasus Mountains. Became the Caucasian people. There's a Behiston monument, a big relief that's carved in the mountainside of the 10 tribes of chieftains, and they were called by the Persians, the Elamites, and the Akkadians in 3 languages. They were called the Itzaku, the Saka, and the Gemeri, which is the name that Israel was given. The Romans later called the sons of Isaac the Saxons, and the Greeks were the first to call them the Scythians. They were captive for 100 years, and they multiplied as a great empire of Scythia, and then went into southern Russia. And here's a map showing that, always driven northwest. Post-exilic names of Israel, if you want to learn in an alphabetical order: the Angles, and the Belgi, the Celts, and the Cymry. The people in Wales wanting to go back to that name instead of Wales. The Danes, the Cimmerians, Franks, Goths, Gemeri, Iberians, Jutes. Jutes were some Jews that came along with them. Kimeru, the Lombards, Maneti, Normans, Ostrogoths, Parthians, Saxons, Scythians, Vikings. As they migrated northwestern hordes across Europe, Jeremiah had told them, when you go, set up signposts, make landmarks, set your heart towards the highway, the way in which you went. Turn back, O virgin of Israel, turn back to the cities. And this time of turning back seems to be approaching. These things are set up all over Europe, thousands of them. So you can follow the dolmens, these megalithic monuments, to see the migration of the lost 10 tribes. They become wanderers among the nations. And they are sometimes called Germanic tribes. The Grimm's brothers told collective stories about these people, folk tales. And somebody wrote up how these really are about the Israelites. How they fell asleep for a long time and nobody knew who they were. After 100 years, they woke up. Well, 2,700 years later, they're waking up. Ptolemy shows Israelite tribes all over Britain. Britain means Brit, covenant, Ish, British. Ish means man, covenant man. Joseph was told he would be a fruitful vine spreading over the edges of the vineyard everywhere. So from Britain, they went to US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, etc. Here's where the other brothers went. Reuben went to France, Simeon, Wales. And granted, as I'm saying this, they were scattered all over the earth. But these are the places where they actually fulfilled a great, powerful destiny. Skim down outline. Now, I just thought I'd throw in some pages from my book. It's hard to see, but it has a lot of details. I think I drew about 500 little images as it went through the years. You see the Magna Carta there? Good going. Joseph tribes, you did well. Everyone deserves due process of law. Build those free nations, send out explorers, send out missionaries. What if we look at this and go, I have ancestry here. I wonder if I'm one of them. What should I do? Well, don't be like Esau, who despised his birthright. Be happy and embrace that. Open your heart to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and say, what am I supposed to do now? Embrace his priorities. Maybe study the calendar and try and do some of the things that the Israelites, the original, when they were doing what they were told, used to do. Study, pray, and you're not alone because these people are waking up all over the world. This book by Yair Davidian, pushing his material because it's amazing. Do you remember Ezekiel's vision in chapter 37 of Ezekiel? He saw dry bones. The bones were rattling and coming together. And pretty soon they stood on their feet as a vast, powerful army. And that's what's happening. I will cause breath to come into you. I won't read this, but try to read Ezekiel 37 and you'll see. Then after the army stands up, he says, take 2 sticks and write 1 stick that says Judah and his friends, and another one that says Joseph. And then take those sticks and put them together. They will be one in my hand. So that's what God's heart is for the seed. The Gentile, not the Gentiles, but the lost Joseph tribes together with the Judah tribes. So these are the Jews and the Joes. We often talk about the Jews and the Gentiles, but guess what? It's really the Jews and the Joes. Now here's a thought. Isn't it time for every Joseph Israelite to befriend a Jew? I asked a guy if I could go to a synagogue one time. He said, yes, please come. So I sat there. This is where you guys have been all these years. And I thought, boy, I really missed something. And then I realized just who I was because I believe I'm one of these. And I ended up making really wonderful friends there, and I still go every now and then to the synagogue to be with my friends from the tribe of Judah. Remember, it's not the Jews and the Gentiles, it's the Jews and the Jews. So God says, I will gather you from among the peoples and assemble you out of all the countries and give you the land. I'll bring them from the land of the north and gather them from the ends of the earth. I'll bring your sons. There's no rapture. It's going to the promised land. I will restore to them a pure tongue. Zephaniah 3:9 says that language will be restored. And in the last 100 years, the language of Hebrew has become a spoken language. It used to be just read in the synagogues, and now 13 million people read it and speak it. So home sweet home, promised land. Thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate it.
Get tickets to this year's event at internationaltruthexpo.com.